The other dragons did not look at Ryeth when he walked past. That was the worst part. Not the insults, not the cold shoulders, but the way they simply chose not to see him. Like looking at him too long might be contagious. Ryeth was big, even by Orin standards. His scales were deep gray, almost black, and his wings folded tight against his back like he was always trying to take up less space. He stood at the edge of the training field alone, staring at his own palms. The skin between his claws was smooth. No heat, no glow, nothing. The sacred flame was supposed to come at birth. Every Orin carried it, a fire that lived in the chest and came out when called. It was not just a weapon. It was proof. Proof that you belonged. Proof that the bloodline was alive in you. Proof that you were worth something. Ryeth had been tested 4 times. For different elders. For different results that all said the same thing. Empty. Still staring at your hands. Sable landed a few feet away. He was everything Ryeth was not. Bright copper scales, proud posture, flame flickering lazily at the corner of his jaw, just because he could. He was not even trying. He never had to try. Don't you have somewhere to be? Ryeth said. I do, Sable said. Here, watching you embarrass the bloodline one more morning. He tilted his head. You know the Accord humans arrived today. Commander LYSS and her batch of soft little recruits. Should be entertaining. Ryeth said nothing. Sable walked past him, close enough that the heat from his scales was noticeable. Try not to scare them with how useless you look, he said, and then he was gone. Ryeth stood there a while longer. Then he folded his hands behind his back and walked toward the main building. The base was a converted Accord structure on the edge of a low-gravity moon. Gray walls, long corridors, everything slightly too small for dragons, which meant Ryeth spent most of his time ducking under door frames. The unit had been assembled under political pressure. The Accord wanted species mixing in combat roles. The Orin sent Ryeth because he was the one they could afford to lose, that he knew that. He had stopped pretending otherwise around year 3. The briefing rooms were on the 2nd level. Ryeth found his usual spot at the back corner, wide enough for his frame, far enough from the others that no one had to acknowledge him. He set down his field notes, straightened them once, and waited. The door opened. A human walked in carrying what appeared to be twice his own body weight in gear. Bags on both shoulders, a pack on his back, a secondary roll tucked under one arm, and a paper map, actual paper, half unfolded in his other hand. He was young, with short dark hair and the kind of face that looked like it defaulted to curious no matter what was happening. His uniform was pressed, but already slightly crooked. He looked at the room, then at the map, then at the room again. This is briefing room 4, Ryeth said, because the human looked like he was about to settle in. Great, the human said. He dropped into the seat next to Ryeth with a sound like a supply crate falling off a shelf. Several bags hit the floor. The map crumpled. He looked at Ryeth with zero sign of discomfort. I'm Darren. Darren Sol. Frontier Corps. First posting. He held out a hand. Ryeth looked at it. Darren kept it there, patient, like he had all the time in the world, and shaking hands with a large gray dragon with no fire was just a normal Tuesday. Ryeth shook it once, carefully. This is room 4, he said again. The human unit briefs in room 7. Darren pulled out the map again. That explains a lot. He did not move. Is room 7 far? Down the hall. Left at the 2nd junction. Great. Darren looked around the room. What's this room for? Mixed unit briefings. Later today. Huh. Darren looked at Ryeth's field notes, then back at him. You're here early. I'm always here early. Me too, Darren said, like they had just discovered something in common. He started reorganizing his bags, apparently comfortable with the silence, which he immediately filled anyway. First day, I got the wrong transport twice, spent an hour in the cargo bay because my clearance code had a typo, and then took the wrong corridor from the landing pad. I have been on this base for 40 minutes, and I am already tired. He paused. Is the food here decent? Ryeth stared at him. I don't know, right? Okay. Darren finally stood, hoisting the bags back up. Room 7. Left at the 2nd junction. Yes. Thanks. He picked up the crumpled map, looked at it once, and tucked it into his pocket. At the door he stopped and looked back. I didn't catch your name. There was a pause. Ryeth. Ryeth. Darren nodded like he was filing it away. See you at the mixed briefing then. He left. Ryeth sat in the silence of room 4. The lights hummed. Outside, through the narrow window, he could see the training field where he had stood that morning, staring at his empty hands. He looked down at them again now. The human had not flinched, had not gone quiet, had not looked at him the way the others did, with that careful, deliberate blankness that meant they were pretending he was not there. Darren's soul had just talked to him, like it was easy, like it was normal. Ryeth did not know what to do with that. So he straightened his field notes, folded his hands on the table, and waited for the briefing to start. 3 days into joint operations, the unit ran a standard canyon drill. Low gravity, simulated enemy contact, timed extraction. Nothing that should go wrong. That IT went wrong. The canyon was old, ancient volcanic rock that the Geological Survey had rated stable. The survey was wrong. 30 minutes into the drill, a section of the eastern wall gave out. 2 soldiers went down under it. A human medic named Petra and a young Greth, a 4-armed species about the size of a large dog, called Wix. Neither was critical, but both were pinned, and the rubble was still shifting. Sable took command immediately. That was not surprising. What was surprising was how fast he organized everyone around himself rather than around the problem. Northwest extraction point, he called out. We pull back, wait for the slide to settle, then go in. They're pinned now, Darren said. He was already crouching near the edge of the debris field, squinting at it. That second shelf is cracked. If it goes, the whole load shifts onto them. I can see that, Sable said. So we go in now, Darren said. Not arguing, just stating. You go in now, and you trigger it yourself, Sable said. Stand down, human. This is not your call. Darren stood up and looked at the debris. Then he looked at Ryeth, who was standing at the back of the group where he usually stood, present but not counted. You're the biggest thing here, Darren said to him. Ryeth blinked. What? If someone holds the top slab, it buys enough time to pull them out. You could hold it. Darren said it the same way he said everything. Not dramatic, just practical, like he was describing how to open a door. You need to brace from the left side. The crack runs right, so the pressure is coming from the left. Everyone was looking at Ryeth now. Sable's expression was flat and unreadable. Ryeth looked at the debris. Darren was right. The crack ran right to left, and the pressure point was on the left side. If someone braced there, the slab would hold long enough for a fast extraction. It would require strength and stillness. No fire needed. Ryeth walked forward. I didn't authorize, Sable started. Then authorize it, Darren said, and he was already moving toward the right side of the debris field, plotting his path in. Or don't, and we lose 2 people. Your call. Sable said nothing. Ryeth got into position. The slab was enormous. Tons of rock, still groaning as the canyon settled. He set his shoulder against it, dug his feet into the ground, and pushed. The shifting stopped. Go, he said. Darren went in fast and low, reading the rubble like a map. He did not pull randomly. He removed specific pieces in a specific order. The ones Ryeth could see him calculating in real time, his eyes moving quick, his hands precise. 2 minutes of careful work. Which came out first? Then Petra, who was conscious and already complaining, which Darren took as a good sign. Clear, Darren called. Ryeth stepped back. The slab groaned and resettled, exactly as it would have before, but now there was no one under it. The rest of the unit stood in a loose cluster. Nobody said much. Darren checked Petra's leg and told Wix to stop moving his second left arm. He did not celebrate. He did not look at Sable. He just did the next thing that needed doing. Back at camp, Ryeth sat outside the medical tent while Petra was seen to inside. Darren came out after a while and sat on a supply crate nearby. He pulled out a ration pack, opened it, looked at the contents with mild suspicion, and started eating anyway. Your reading of that debris was accurate, Ryeth said. I grew up near a quarry, Darren said. You learn what rock sounds like when it's about to do something bad. He chewed. You held that for a long time. It was not difficult. Darren glanced at him sideways. I've been here 3 days, and every time there's something that needs doing, everyone looks past you. Like your furniture. He said it without heat. Just observation. Ryeth did not answer. What? Darren asked. The honest answer was long and complicated and not something Riot had ever said out loud to anyone, let alone a human he had known for 72 hours. So he gave his short version. I was born without the sacred flame. Among my people, that means I'm not really Orin. Not really anything. Darren stopped chewing. He looked at Riot for a moment. Not with pity. Riot had learned to spot pity fast, and that was not what was on Darren's face. It was closer to the expression he had made looking at the cracked debris slab, like he was trying to understand the structure of something. So they wrote you off, Darren said. Yes. And you let them. Riot looked at him. It is not a matter of letting. It is simply what is. Darren considered that. He finished his ration, folded the pack neatly, and stood up. Okay, he said. Not an agreement. More like he was making a note. He walked back toward the main block without another word. Riot sat there alone. He was used to being alone. But usually, after conversations about the flame, people got awkward and wandered off, relieved to be done with it. Darren had wandered off looking like he was thinking. That was different. The night patrol assignment was not an accident. Riot knew that. Darren probably knew it too, but he picked up his kit without comment and fell in his step. And that was that .IT, was a perimeter sweep, 6 hours, low threat rating, the kind of assignment given to people the senior staff wanted out of the way for a while. The moon had no real night cycle, but the base ran on standard accord time, and at this hour the sky was dark and the temperature dropped enough to see breath. Darren's. Anyway, Riot did not produce visible breath. Another thing that marked him as wrong among his own kind, who ran hot enough to steam in the cold. They walked in silence for the first half hour. Riot set the pace without meaning to, and Darren matched it without complaint. The terrain was flat rock and low scrub, easy going. Nothing moved except the wind. Can I ask you something? Darren said. You will regardless, Riot said. Darren smiled slightly. Where are you from? Originally, the Orin home system, a mountainous region, high altitude. Riot paused. Cold, very cold for a dragon territory. That why your scales are darker. High altitude, Orin absorb more light. It is adaptive. He looked at Darren. You are asking simple questions first. I am, Darren agreed. I'm building up to the harder ones. Riot almost said something that might have been a dry remark. He stopped himself. Where are you from? Earth. Frontier zone, near the old quarry belt I mentioned. It's not glamorous. Mostly dust and geology and people who are too stubborn to move somewhere nicer. He said it with easy affection. Humans from there tend to be either very calm or very loud. Not much in between. Which are you? Depends on the situation. He stepped over a ridge of rock. What does the sacred flame actually do? Physically, I mean. And there it was. Riot was quiet for a moment. It is biological, he said finally. A gland structure near the chest cavity. It produces and ignites a combustible compound. In battle, it is a weapon. In social context, it signals status, emotion, intent. A dragon who is angry runs visibly hotter. A dragon who is content has a low, steady glow. It is how we are read by each other. How we are known. And you don't have it. The gland is present. The tests confirm that much. It simply produces nothing. No compound. No reaction. He kept walking. They tested me 4 times. For different methods. Who designed the tests? Riot stopped walking. Darren stopped too, and looked at him with that same structural expression. Calm, curious, not leading anywhere cruel. What do you mean? Riot asked. I mean, who designed the tests? Are they the same tests used for hundreds of years? Have they been updated? Are they calibrated for every variation of Orin biology, or for the common ones? Riot stared at him. The question had never been asked. Not once. Not by any elder, any medic, any examiner across 4 separate evaluations spanning the first 20 years of his life. I don't know, he said. Huh, Darren said, not triumphant, just thinking. He started walking again. On Earth, there were all kinds of medical conditions that people thought were permanent failures. Things that turn out to be fine once someone asked the right question. Took centuries sometimes. Because the question that got asked was, what is wrong with this person, instead of what are we missing? Riot was quiet. Has anyone ever looked at whether the flame can develop late? Darren asked. No. or whether emotional state affects activation. No, or whether the cold region Orin have different gland development timelines. Riot stopped again. I'm not a scientist, Darren said. I'm a rookie knight who grew up near Quarry. So maybe this is all obvious to someone smarter. But those seem like reasonable things to ask. The wind moved across the flat rock. Far above, the gas giant the moon orbited was half visible, pale, and enormous. The Orin do not study failure, Riot said. It came out quieter than he intended. When something does not work, it is removed. That is the method. That's a bad method, Darren said simply. Efficient, maybe, but you lose a lot. You lose one defective heir. Or, Darren said, you lose the one dragon whose flame works differently than anything you've seen before, and you never find out because you stopped looking. Riot looked at him for a long moment. Darren met the look without any particular drama. Steady, open, like the world was mostly a set of problems that had not been solved yet rather than a set of judgments waiting to land. Why are you saying these things to me? Riot asked. Darren thought about it. Because they're true, he said, and because nobody else seems to be saying them. He shrugged one shoulder. Come on, we've got 4 more hours, and I don't know this terrain well enough to fall behind. They kept walking. Riot did not talk much for the rest of the patrol, but the questions Darren had asked stayed with him. Not painful, the way questions about the flame usually were, but something else. Something that felt faintly, dangerously like the idea that there was still something to find out that he had stopped believing that a long time ago. He was not sure what to do with it starting again. The attack came on the 9th day, before dawn by base time, while most of the unit was between sleep and alert at IT was not a large force. 6 ships, fast and stripped down, from a rogue faction called the Keth Splinter, disorganized but aggressive, carrying a specific grudge against Accord integration facilities. They hit the outer wall with 2 concussive charges, dropped 3 teams through the breach, and moved fast. Commander LYSS caught the first burst of suppressive fire coming out of her quarters. She went down hard, not dead, but her left side was wrecked, and she was out of the fight within the first 2 minutes. That left Sable as the senior combat officer. Sable was good. Riot had never doubted that. He organized the perimeter fast, directed fire teams with precision, kept the defenders from scattering. He fought the way the Orin trained: clean lines, dominant position, suppress, and advance. The Keth teams adapted. They split the Orin pressure points, found the gaps between organized fire lanes, and pushed small groups through. Sable's structured approach had one weakness. It needed predictability to function. When the situation moved faster than the plan, there was a lag. Riot saw it happening that he was not in a fire team. Sable had placed him in a holding position near the medical bay, protect the non-combatants, which both of them understood meant stay out of the way. Riot stayed for a while. Then he saw Petra, still on a crutch from the canyon drill, dragging a supply crate in front of the med bay door as a barricade. Wix was beside her with a short-range pulse weapon, for arms working a reload with focus speed that a Keth team was 40 meters out and moving their way. Riot moved that he did not think about it. He put himself between the Keth team and the medical bay, and he stayed there. He had no fire. He had no ranged capability to speak of. What he had was size and density, and the simple fact that he was hard to go around and harder to go through. The Keth team tried anyway. He took hits, kinetic rounds that cracked 2 scales on his shoulder and one on his forearm. They were not nothing. He felt them. But he had grown up in high-altitude cold on a world that wanted to kill everything on it. And he had spent 20 years being told he was defective, and somewhere in the accumulated weight of those 2 things, he had built a kind of stubbornness that was difficult to shoot out of him. He held the position. And then the Keth team shifted, 2 breaking left to flank, and Darren came from behind the supply block at a dead run and hit the left flanker with a shoulder tackle that had absolutely no tactical elegance whatsoever. It worked purely because no one had anticipated a human running toward a Keth soldier at full speed like that was a reasonable thing to do. Darren was fast when he had to be. He was also small enough to stay low and hard to track in close quarters. The second flanker aimed. Riot moved his arm in the way. Another hit. He grabbed the weapon, carefully so as not to injure the soldier, and removed it from the situation. The rest of the Keth team fell back. The other squads pushed the remaining infiltrators out through the breach shortly after. The attack collapsed. Darren sat down heavily against the supply block. He had a cut above his ear, and his uniform had a long scorch mark across the left arm. But he was intact. "You're bleeding," he said, looking at Riath's shoulder. "It is minor," Riath said. "Sure." Darren leaned his head back. "Thanks for the cover." "You were covering me," Riath said. Darren shrugged. "Joint operation." They were quiet. Riath looked at his hands. During the fight, at the moment when Darren was cornered, when Riath had moved without thinking, there had been something. Heat, not the ambient kind. Internal. A pressure in the chest that built fast and went nowhere, like a door opened and then shut immediately. A flicker. His palms were warm in a way they had not been warm before. Darren looked over. "You okay?" Riath closed his hands. "Yes." Darren studied him for a second with that quiet, reading expression. "You sure? Because you look like someone who just saw something they weren't expecting." "I am sure," he said. Darren nodded slowly, like he was not entirely convinced, but he let it go. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a ration bar, broke it in half, and held the larger half out toward Riath. Riath took it. It was a small thing, but he noticed that Darren had given him the bigger half without thinking about it. He noticed things like that now. He was not sure when that had started. Elder Vorn arrived on the 12th day. He came with 2 senior Orin and Sable at his side, in a ship that was older than the base and better maintained. Vorn himself was the oldest dragon Riath had ever seen in person. His scales pale at the edges, his movements measured, his presence the kind that filled rooms without effort. He was not unkind. That was the important thing to understand about him. He simply believed, the way some structures believe in their own load-bearing capacity, that the way things had always been was the way things had to be. He found Riath in the corridor outside the medical bay. "I received the action report," Vorn said. "There was an incident. There was an attack," Riath said. "We held the position. There was a report of anomalous thermal readings from your area during the engagement." Vorn studied him with calm, ancient eyes. "The base sensors logged something. A stress response. Combat condition." Riath kept his voice even. "Nothing confirmed." Vorn was quiet for a moment. "I want to be clear with you. Anomalies under duress are documented. They do not constitute activation. The sacred flame is not a flicker under pressure. It is a sustained biological function present from birth." He paused. "I say this not to diminish what happened. I say it because false hope is crueler than honest truth." Riath said nothing. "Your assignment here will continue," Vorn said. "The Accord requires our participation. But I want you to manage expectations, your own, and those of the people around you." He glanced briefly down the corridor, particularly the humans. Riath followed the glance. Darren was at the far end of the corridor, apparently trying to fix a wall panel that had been damaged in the attack, using a multi-tool and the expression of someone solving a puzzle for fun. He had not noticed them. "He is a fellow unit member," Riath said. "He is an influence," Vorn said. "Not hostile, just precise." Sable stood slightly behind Vorn and said nothing. This alone was unusual. Sable always had something to say. Vorn turned to leave. "Sir," Riath said it before he had decided to. Vorn stopped. "You said the sacred flame is a biological function present from birth. But I was not born on the homeworld. I was born in the mountain territories, high altitude, cold climate, reduced solar exposure. The gland development studies were all conducted on homeworld Orin. Has anyone studied whether the development timeline differs from mountain-born?" Vorn was still. "That is an old question," he said finally. "I don't believe it has been asked before," Riath said. "It has," Vorn said. 40 years before your birth. The conclusion was that regional variation does not affect the sacred flame." "Who ran the study?" Another pause. Longer. Before Vorn could answer, a voice came from the end of the corridor. "Sorry, am I interrupting?" Darren was walking toward them with his multi-tool still in hand, looking at the group with polite attention. He stopped at a respectful distance. His eyes moved from Vorn to the 2 senior Orin to Sable, and then back to Vorn. "I don't think we've met," Darren said. "D'avant seul, Fontico. Your Orin leadership. I'm guessing. Vorn looked at him with the expression given to something unexpected that had not yet been categorized. Elder Vorn, Rieth said. He leads the Orin delegation to the Accord Council. Ah. Darren nodded respectfully. Sir, can I ask, the study you mentioned, the one on regional variation, do you know who conducted it? Everyone looked at him. I was fixing the panel, Darren said, gesturing back down the corridor. Acoustics carry. He was not apologetic about it. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm curious because if the study is 40 years old and predates current Orin biological mapping, there might be a question worth reopening. That's not a challenge. It's just, science tends to get more precise over time, and Rieth's situation is unusual enough that unusual questions seem worth asking. Vorn regarded him for a long moment. You are very direct, Vorn said. I'm from the Quarry Belt, Darren said. It's a regional trait. Something shifted in Sable's face. Not warmth, not agreement, but the particular expression of someone who has just heard an argument they cannot immediately defeat and knows it. Vorn looked from Darren to Rieth. His face was unreadable in the way of very old creatures who have learned to read everyone else without showing anything back. I will review the original study data, Vorn said at last. It was not a promise. It was not a concession. But it was not a door closed, either that he left. The two senior Orin followed. Sable paused at the corridor junction and looked back at Rieth, just for a second, without the usual dismissal in his eyes. Then he was gone. Darren clicked his multi-tool closed and looked at Rieth. That went okay, he said. You were eavesdropping, Rieth said. I was fixing a panel. It's not my fault the corridor is narrow. He tilted his head. He's going to look at the study. He said he would review the data. Same thing. Darren pocketed the multi-tool. That's something. Rieth looked down the corridor where Vorn had gone. It was not a victory. It was barely a crack in something that had been sealed his whole life. But cracks were where light came in. He had read that somewhere once. He had not believed it then, that he was less certain about his disbelief now. The mission came on the 16th day. A downed Accord survey vessel had clipped a debris field and gone silent in a narrow canyon system 400 kilometers out. Crew of 5, alive on emergency beacon, but the canyon was tight, unstable, and drawing attention from a Keth Splinter scouting team that had picked up the distress signal. LYSS was still recovering. She cleared the mission from her cot and told them not to waste time. They went in short. 7 fighters, 2 extraction craft, 1 tight window before the Keth team reached the downed ship. Sable led the outer perimeter. Rieth was assigned to the inner team, Darren's team, working the actual extraction. The canyon was worse than the brief suggested. Narrow walls, unstable scree on both sides, and a signal environment so bad that comms cut in and out every 40 seconds. The downed vessel was wedged at the base of a rock formation that had partly collapsed on top of it. The crew was alive, but the hatch was blocked. Darren and Rieth cleared the hatch in 11 minutes. Crew out in 14. 2 of the 5 needed carry assists. It was hard, fast work, and it went well until the moment it didn't. The Keth team arrived early. 3 fast gunships came over the canyon rim, and the extraction craft scattered to avoid fire. The team split in the chaos. Rieth kept visual on Darren until the 3rd Keth pass, when a burst hit the rock face above them, and the scree came down in a wave. When the dust cleared, Rieth was on one side of a new barrier. Darren was on the other. Rieth could hear him over the partial comm. The signal kept breaking, but enough came through. I've got the 2 injured crew with me, Darren's voice said, cutting in and out. We're mobile, mostly. Keth team is between me and Delta. A pause. I'm going to find a secondary position and wait it out. Don't do anything stupid. That last part was aimed at Rieth. He knew because of the tone. Rieth looked at the barrier. It was passable for something his size if he moved fast. The Keth gunship made another pass overhead. He tracked its arc. There was a window. 40, maybe 50 seconds before it came back around, he went over the barrier fast, landed hard, picked up his bearing from the last known position in Darren's signal, and ran. The Keth ground team was between him and the secondary position. 4 of them, armed, not expecting a dragon from the wrong direction at speed. Rieth hit the first position like a wall. He was not elegant. He had no fire, No significant ranged weapon, just mass and momentum and the knowledge that he had to get to the other side before the gunship completed its arc. He went through the Keth position the way water goes through a gap, finding the path of least resistance by making it. And then, mid-stride, it happened. He heard Darren's voice ahead, still talking, giving positions, keeping the injured crew calm, doing 17 things at once the way humans did when they refused to stop. The sound of it landed somewhere deep in Ryth's chest. Not thought, not decision. Something below that. The gland that had never worked in 20 years of tests did not flicker this time. It opened. The fire was not a burst or a weapon discharge. It was a sustained column, white at the core and moving down his forearms in a controlled wave, the way he had watched other Orin carry their flame his whole life. Controlled, present, unmistakable. The Keth ground team ran. The gunship peeled off. Ryth stood in the canyon and looked at his hands were burning, and it was not stopping. Darren stepped out from behind a rock formation with the two injured crew leaning on him. He looked at Ryth. He looked at the fire. He was quiet for a moment. "There you are," he said finally. Quiet, like he was talking to the flame rather than to Ryth. The extraction craft came in 20 minutes later. Everyone made it back. Vorn received the mission report that evening. He was silent for a long time. Then he updated Ryth's record. The status field, unchanged for 20 years. Now read one word. Confirmed. That night, Ryth found Darren sitting on the base roof. Technically off-limits, but the roof access hatch had not closed properly since the attack, and Darren had apparently noted this as useful information. He sat down beside him. The gas giant filled the sky, slow and vast. "You knew," Ryth said. Darren turned to look at him. "I suspected," he said. "There is a difference." Ryth was quiet for a moment. "Why did you bother with any of it?" Darren considered the question honestly, the way he considered most things. "Because you were worth the bother," he said. "That's usually enough reason for us." Below them, the base ran its quiet routines. Somewhere inside, Sable was filing a mission report and not including a single dismissive word about Ryth, the closest thing to respect he knew how to give. Ryth held his hand up, palm open, and let the flame come. Slow, steady, the way it felt when it was simply there rather than forced. That Akati did not go out. Some things, once lit, do not.